In a recent report from the Financial Times, a warning was issued that has rattled the Kremlin, particularly President Vladimir Putin. The warning centers around former President Donald Trump's planned approach to NATO, and it signals troubling developments for Russia's future, especially regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Putin's strategic concerns. Trump has made it clear one of his priorities if he returns to office will be to demand that NATO members significantly increase their defense spending. Currently, NATO has a target for defense spending of 2% of each member's GDP. However, Trump has consistently pushed for a much higher target. During his first term, he proposed that NATO countries double their defense spending target to 4%. As he prepares for a potential second term in office, he has again voiced his belief that NATO members are not contributing enough to their own defense, while the US has been carrying too much of the financial burden. Trump's view is that NATO's defense spending must be significantly increased, particularly from European countries that are geographically closer to Russia. According to Trump, these countries should be taking on a greater responsibility for their own defense because they are in a more vulnerable position than the United States. By building up their own defense capabilities, these nations can deter Russia from launching any potential aggression. Trump argues that the best way to prevent a war is to ensure that Russia never believes it can win. He points to Russia's initial belief that it would quickly conquer Ukraine in just a few days when it launched its invasion in February 2022, as an example of how a strong defense can serve as a deterrent. The map illustrating defense spending among NATO members highlights a concerning disparity. Only 3 countries that share a border with Russia, Poland, Estonia, and Latvia, are currently spending more than 3% of their GDP on defense, with Poland being the highest at around 4.5%. Meanwhile, many other NATO members, including major economies like Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, are consistently falling below the 2% target. This underfunding is precisely what Trump refers to as American freeloading, where the US is effectively subsidizing Europe's defense. Trump's argument is further supported by defense analysts who note that NATO countries must increase their spending to ensure they can counter any future Russian threats. For instance, Mark, a defense expert featured in the Financial Times report, argues that nations like Germany need to come to terms with reality. Russia has shown no signs of backing down from its aggressive stance. Even as President Putin talks about being willing to negotiate, he also expresses that the West is at war with Russia, which makes it clear that Europe must prepare for long-term security challenges. The inadequacy of European air defense systems further exacerbates the threat. As of now, only 20% of Europe is covered by air defense systems, leaving the rest vulnerable to potential attacks, including drones and missiles that could be launched by Russia. Trump's push for increased defense spending is part of a broader strategy to ensure that NATO remains strong and capable of defending its members. While Trump has suggested a target as high as 5% of GDP, most experts believe that a more reasonable target would be closer to 3.5%. Still, even that is a steep ask for many countries, especially those with large economies like Germany and the UK. The figures being discussed are likely to represent a starting point in negotiations, with the actual targets being worked out over time. Some experts argue that the Cold War era, where many countries were spending up to 5% of GDP on defense, demonstrates the level of commitment needed to deter larger conflicts. A major military buildup, they argue, can prevent full-scale war, much as it did during the Cold War. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy recently reiterated the critical nature of NATO's involvement and the continued support that Ukraine needs from the West to counter Russian aggression. Zelenskyy emphasized the importance of strong US leadership and praised Trump as a strong man who could help Ukraine navigate the complexities of the ongoing war. He also reiterated that the West must be prepared to deal with Russia's extreme tactics, which have involved significant loss of life and the targeting of civilians. Putin's aggressive actions have not only led to the loss of life and military casualties but also exposed his willingness to go to extreme lengths to suppress opposition. High-profile figures who have opposed him, including political dissidents like Alexei Navalny and mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, have either been targeted, imprisoned, or killed. This behavior underscores the dangerous nature of Putin's regime, as well as the unpredictable risks that come with negotiating with him. The Russian president has claimed on multiple occasions that NATO expansion is a threat to Russia's security, a primary reason for launching his invasion of Ukraine. However, as the war has dragged on, NATO has only expanded, with Finland and Sweden now part of the alliance. These countries, which had previously maintained a neutral stance, have now chosen to join NATO because they recognize that the best way to protect themselves from Russian aggression is to align with the Western military alliance. Despite his objections to NATO, Putin has not sufficiently fortified his own borders, particularly in regions like Finland and Sweden. This indicates that the real reasons behind the invasion of Ukraine are more complex and may include Putin's desire to restore Russian dominance and re-establish something resembling the Soviet Empire, which he views as the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. As the conflict approaches its third year, Putin's ability to sustain the war is coming into question. Despite initial expectations that the war would be a quick and decisive operation, the reality on the ground has been far different. Russian casualties are mounting, and the Russian economy is under significant strain. Putin has even suggested in recent statements that he is open to compromise, though his offers are often framed in terms of misleading narratives. He claims that Ukraine had initially agreed to a peace deal, which was later abandoned at the behest of Western powers, particularly the UK. Putin's narrative about NATO's expansion is also inaccurate, as the alliance operates on an open-door policy rather than actively seeking to expand its ranks. In response to Putin's recent statements, Trump has indicated that he is open to continuing US support for Ukraine, even if his long-term goal is to push for NATO members to take on more of the financial burden. Trump has expressed that the US will continue to fund Ukraine's defense but that NATO members need to step up their contributions. The aim is to ensure that when negotiations with Russia do eventually take place, Ukraine will be in the strongest possible position. The US will keep funding Ukraine, but only as long as it ensures that the country has the means to secure a favorable outcome in any potential peace talks. Trump's appointment of experienced military figures, such as General Keith Kellogg, to positions that influence foreign policy signals that the next administration would be prepared to take a more strategic approach to the conflict. General Kellogg, in particular, has expertise in understanding Russian tactics and is focused on ensuring that the US and NATO avoid being drawn into an attrition war with Russia, which could lead to massive casualties on both sides. The goal, according to military experts, is to avoid prolonged conflict and to find a diplomatic solution before the war escalates into a broader global conflict. As President Trump moves closer to assuming office, it's clear that his approach to NATO and the ongoing war in Ukraine will play a crucial role in shaping global security dynamics. His push for increased defense spending from NATO countries and his stance on supporting Ukraine in its struggle against Russia are likely to have significant implications for the future of European security, US foreign policy, and the overall balance of power in the region. The coming years may be some of the most critical in modern history, as the world navigates the increasingly complex geopolitical tensions between the West and Russia.